Russian President Vladimir Putin lashed out at Iran's critics during a landmark visit to Tehran on Tuesday. Mr. Putin warned against any military action in Iran as he met leaders of nations bordering the Caspian Sea. And at a time of mounting tensions over Iran's nuclear ambitions, he also backed Tehran's right to nuclear energy. Anish Raman reports.
They spent the day side by side, two presidents challenging the West by affirming Iran's right to nuclear power.
When it comes to the nuclear issue, the Iranians are cooperating with Russian nuclear agencies to reach a peaceful objective. And all the countries involved have expressed their idea that peaceful nuclear activities must be allowed.
Russia is, of course, a veto member of the same UN Security Council looking to sanction Iran again over its year-long defiance of a UN deadline to stop enriching uranium. The chances of that now seem slim. And with a close to $1 billion deal in place for Moscow to build Iran's first nuclear power plant, the Russian president warned the world against attacking the Islamic Republic, vowing that no Caspian Sea country would be used to hit another. A veiled reference, it would seem, to Azerbaijan, where the U.S. is rumored, according to the Associated Press, to be considering as a staging ground for any possible military action against Iran. It all seems a Putin-style slap in the face for the Bush White House. But why now?
Two themes dominate the mindset of the Kremlin today. First, they're delighted that America is bogged down as it is in Iraq and Afghanistan. And second, the Kremlin has an exaggerated notion of Russia's own importance.
By any measure, this was a historic trip, the first one since 1943 of a Kremlin leader. Back then, it was Joseph Stalin, sitting side by side with U.S. President Franklin Roosevelt and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, three allies eager to end World War II. This time, a much different message from Vladimir Putin, one of support for Iran and, in turn, one of great concern for the West. Anish Raman, CNN, Cairo.
So, as we just heard, Russia is sending a clear message to the West. There are those who would also argue President Putin is upping the ante in the run-up to next year's Russian presidential election. Earlier, I spoke to our chief international correspondent, Christiane Amanpour.
I don't even think it's about the election. I think Vladimir Putin has really solidified himself in the hearts and minds of the Russian people today. Albeit he's walking back democracy, he's walking back freedom of the press, he's heavily cut back the liberty and independence of the television. He's really omnipotent now. There is one party. He's now said that he's going to be head of that one party, lead it to parliamentary elections. He's not worried about his position and his political position, but what he is concerned about is Russia's greatness, Russia's, importance in the world, because that's what the people in Russia are responding to.
But there are those who would also say that, for example, in France, newly elected President Sarkozy is also concerned about France's greatness, and he, of course, has made statements about Iran. The United States also quibbling with the IAEA over how to deal with Iran. Does anyone or any international body have a clear, unified policy?
I think the short answer is no, they don't. Certainly the US and Western Europe believe that increased pressure, including increased sanctions, is the way to go. Russia apparently doesn't believe that's the way to go, and President Putin was in Iran today meeting with President Ahmadinejad and basically saying publicly again that Iran has the right to a peaceful nuclear program, but didn't do what the US hoped it would do, which is also publicly hear Putin say, but you must be transparent to the Iranians. You must come clean to the IAEA about all the unanswered questions about your nuclear program. That did not come out of his mouth publicly. Who knows what went on behind the scenes, but he has warned even in Germany to the EU, do not pressure, do not try to intimidate Iran.
And of course, there is the recent strike by Israel on an unspecified target in Syria. They haven't said it officially themselves, but that is also clearly a warning sign towards Iran.
I think Israel feels that it is. What happened September the 6th, there was an incident. For a long time, nobody knew quite what it was. September 11th, we broke the news that actually there was an Israeli airstrike on a target inside Syria. The Syrians didn't talk about it, the Israelis didn't talk about it, nobody talked about it really, except now it's come out slowly that it was possibly a nascent, or at least the Israelis believed that it was possibly a nascent nuclear facility. But there's great division about what it was. Was it an imminent threat? Was it anyway close to up and running? The issue seems to be that Israel, trying to re-establish its deterrent capability after being so badly damaged in the war with Hezbollah a year ago. We know from our sources that Prime Minister Olmert has now briefed over the last 10 days European and other world leaders, heads of government, heads of state, about what happened there. And we also know from people who've told us that the Prime Minister himself was in the command and control bunker while this operation was underway on the night of September 6th, and it was such an important moment. Apparently they were thrilled with the success of it. All the leading officials toasted each other and cheered that they had done this successful strike. Again, there's still a mystery about exactly what it was and exactly how dangerous this target was. But clearly, Israel has said that it was a message not just to Syria but to Iran as well, that no nuclear program will be tolerated anywhere in its vicinity.
Do you see any progress on the Iranian nuclear issue before the end of the Bush administration?
It's really hard to see it. There's one thing that could happen, and that is Mohammed El-Baradei of the IAEA could pronounce himself satisfied by the end of the year, because he's made a sort of a separate deal with Iran, come clean on all these outstanding issues by the end of the year. Of course, he could pronounce himself unsatisfied. And then there's also this now new dilemma within the United States with the usual suspects, the hawks, Vice President Cheney and his allies, wanting to send a strong and maybe a military message to Iran. So some people are saying there still might be some kind of airstrike or raid on Iran, not an invasion like Iraq, but it shows really that there's no real global idea of how to deal with this issue.
CNN Chief International Correspondent Christiane Amanpour.